Well, I'm actually going to be at Vitalia in a couple of days, so I'm going to meet a bunch of you. And have early board meetings in a few days. So looking forward to seeing everybody, and if I can't see you just yet. I'm going to give my little stump speech here, so to speak, and then catch up on all the talks. And then also, we're going to do another one tomorrow, I think a little fireside, to answer a bunch of questions. But I've got something that, many of you may have seen before, and then something totally new towards the end. So without further ado, let me jump in. Audio good? Everything good? Should I go? Yes? Yeah. All right, great. All right, so let me introduce the concept of the network state. We've started new currencies, then we start new countries. Obviously, everybody here is familiar with this, but I'm going to just kind of give the 5 or 10 minute overview and then show you something. So this is the V1 of the book at thenetworkstate.com, which you can go and take a look at, okay? Essentially, it says how we might actually be able to start a cloud country, okay? And what I'm going to tell you about today is that starting in countries, I believe it's possible, preferable, and profitable. Let's start with the question, why is it possible? Well, we know that, the multi-billion-dollar company Google started from a girl. We know that the multi-billion person online community Facebook was started from a girl. And we know that the multi-billion, dollar market cap cryptocurrency Bitcoin was started from a white paper. So could we start something of comparable scale, a new country, just like we started a new company, a new community, a new currency from nothing? Could we start a new country, right? Or is the end of the line for the internet just slinging coins and tokens and uploading all day? Maybe that's the end of the line. I don't think it is. I take the internet seriously. Can we start new internet countries, not just internet currencies? This is a visual of what I think that would look like, a network state with 1,729,314 people. It's essentially a physical social network with nodes around the world, and essentially the people in these nodes have crowdfunded territory locally, okay? Now, the thing about this is, it's just like Bitcoin has nodes for miners around the world, or Ethereum or Solana's validators around the world. If Bitcoin's a decentralized currency, a network state is a decentralized country, okay? So how would you actually build up something like this? How would you get to 1 million? Well, here's an example, literally starting with one person, for example, in Tokyo, okay? And one person in Tokyo, and then as they recruit people, they go to 17, and then 172, and then 1,729. And notice that their annual income and real estate footprint, all of which you can prove on chain, increases with the size of the community. As you get to 17,000 and 170,000 people, and eventually 1.729 million, people can start crowdfunding, not just individual buildings, but entire cul-de-sacs, small towns. Imagine if all the Chinatowns of the world, all the little Indias, were a network China city, right? A new China, a new India, okay? That is what's possible. With Prospera, which you're in right now, it can have other cities that, or other, Prospera neighborhoods that it networks together. Cabin is doing this, cul-de-sac is doing something like this. I think all of these different projects will sort of converge on this model of an initial campus, and then distributing out from there, or a cloud community that starts distributed it, and then they start looking like network cities, network towns. Okay. So why does 1 million put us within country range? Why is that achievable? Well, 1 million is actually quite small for a social network, but it's in the middle of the range for countries. Most countries are actually small countries if you define a country as a UN member. The majority of UN members have less than 10 million citizens. Do you know that? We usually think about a country as being like the United States or Russia or India or China, which have hundreds of millions or even 1 billion people. But UN membership has actually grown over time. There's lots of small countries. It's gone from 45 countries around the end of World War II to almost 200 countries today as the British Empire, the French Empire, and the Soviet Empire broke down. So it's been flat for the last 30 years, but then so was the creation of new currencies. And the thing about cryptocurrencies is they rank with fiat currencies. Cryptocurrencies are at a scale that ranks with fiat, with fiat. This is a fun cycle fiat market cap. You can see that at the time of the screenshot, Bitcoin is somewhere between the Turkish lira and Chilean peso. So if most countries are small countries and lots of new countries have been created, and cryptocurrencies rank with fiat currencies, put that together, could crypto countries rank with fiat countries? Here are now the nations of the world, and if you had a nation real estate pop, as opposed to coin market cap, okay, Nation Real Estate Pop would have a network state with 1,729,314 people as being intermediate between Latvia and Bahrain. Okay, the only difference is it's comparable in terms of population and everything else like that. It's just global and decentralized. It's as if you had, if you think about the country of Indonesia, that's a bunch of islands separated by ocean that think of themselves as a country. You should have a bunch of islands separated by internet that think of themselves as a country. That's what a network state looks like. So, nearby to somewhat nearby, Honduras, for example, is French Guiana. That's considered part of France. Hawaii is considered part of the U.S. So is Alaska considered part of the U.S., despite not being part of contiguous territory. The network state just takes that to the nth power. Okay. So that's why cryptocurrencies could rank with fiat countries. By the way, if you notice over here, I put a network state as having a very high population growth rate. That's because all of these type A personalities, for the same reason they want to rank on coin market cap, they'll want to rank on the network state dashboard. There's two ways to grow, which are immigration and reproduction. So all these type A personalities will want to have like 5 or 10 kids. This is, I think, how we solve the fertility issues and so on that people have talked about, right? We actually give a collective reason to rise into the dashboard. All right. So I'm like half kidding, but I'm half kidding, right? Okay, so this is where a group of 1,620,314 people would land. This links the dashboard to this ranking. Okay. The thing is, you might say, well, okay, you might get big. Lots of these things have gotten big, but why would you get a diplomatic recognition? Answer is, this community would actually have a leader or a group of leaders, and they could go and negotiate, just like, for example, Tuvalu did a deal with GoDaddy for the .tv domain name. Nevada did a deal with Tesla for the Gigafactory. El Salvador's got Bitcoin as its national currency. And there's many more examples like this that can be multiplied. There's DAO laws in Wyoming and Tennessee. The mayors of Miami and New York set Bitcoin as their currency. Colombia's done a deal for the .co domain name. And I could go on and on. Point is, the cloud is already negotiating with the land. The land is already open for business. We've already seen sovereigns, countries, cities, counties ink deals with companies and cryptocurrencies, so they could do so with the crypto community in a crypto country, right? So with sufficient traction, we can get diplomatic recognition. Doesn't necessarily mean you're a full country right off the bat, but could you get a special economic zone? Could you get a patch of land where you could have a self-driving car zone? Absolutely you can, and Prospera is proof of that. And now this is how we can scale it out, right? Okay. So then moreover, on top of L1s, which gain some measure of sovereignty, you can build L2s. Vitalia is like an L2 on top of Prospera's L1. Okay. Second, why is it preferable? So there's both the push and the pull. It's the powerless people and the power users. It's a crypto coalition. It's a U-shape, right? They say, people who have, they're in Sri Lanka, they're in Venezuela, they're in Panama. There's riots because of inflation or political turmoil. Powerless people really need an alternative to failed states. It's Turkey, it's Lebanon, all these countries around the world that have issues. And conversely, ambitious people have always wanted an alternative in the form of frontier societies. The same impulse that made humans radiate out of Africa, come to the US, the Statue of Liberty, even land on the moon, that is the power user, the ambitious person. So the crypto coalition is this coalition. It's the powerless and the power user. Just like crypto is, people who are just trying to hang on to a bank account, and people who are transforming what a bank account even is, so too are crypto countries are the people who are, just need a stable country, and then people who are trying to disrupt what the concept of country even is and push the limits of it, right? So it's not, crucially, if you're like a middle class person who's like basically okay with your country, then you don't care about this for a while, right? It's only if you're dissatisfied in some sense because you live in a failed state or because you're trying to push the limits of the regulatory state, that's where this is for. And so we have to know our target market. And a lot of people will never get it. In fact, you might say, oh, it's never going to go mainstream. Guess what? The United States hasn't gone mainstream. It's only 4% of the world. 96% of the world has not come to the United States. Yet it changed the world, right? 99.99% of the world isn't an employee of Google or Facebook. But that changed the world, right? So the entire concept of you need to get to 50%, let alone 10%, let alone 1% to change the world is not true. Tiny Estonia, which is less than 0.01% of the world, less than only over 1 million people, or around 0.1% of the world. That's changed the world with its internet election. So you don't need to have everybody to do this to make a big deal. That's why it's preferable. And then why is it profitable? Last but not least, the other measure of feasibility is economic feasibility. This is a great graphic that I made, as I like it, where it's annual revenue per user of per capita of nation states, social networks, and network states. Let's put them all on the same chart. So first, let's do the social networks. Down here, that's Meta, WeChat, TikTok, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Twitter, Sina Weibo, that's the Chinese Twitter. And these have hundreds of millions or even billions of users. It's a log scale in this axis. But their dollars per year are only in the tens of dollars. So Meta might make, $30, $40 per year per user, which is actually a lot, multiplied by, 3 billion people. That's, $100 billion a year. That's a lot of money. However, it's not that much money per user. Then you go to the small nation states like Estonia, Singapore, Israel, Switzerland, and so on. And these have very high monetization per user in the sense of their tax revenues in the tens of thousands of dollars per citizen per year. But their populations are only like 1 to 10 million in scale. These are small countries with large populations. Finally, over here, you have the big countries, the US and China, and it's sort of satisfying to see that they have the right combination of size and scale. This is why we consider them maybe the two strongest countries in the world, because they have size and scale here. And then here's where network states would land up. They'd be in the 1 to 10 million person range initially. And their annual revenue per user would be on the order of hundreds to thousands of dollars per person per year. Why? Because it would start off with like a digital subscription to a Discord or a Substack or an NFT community of some kind, and then graduates to a physical subscription where they're paying rent. It's a new SaaS, society as a service. Okay, I hope you guys like that, right? So new SaaS, society as a service, is not about necessarily building a global tech company. It's about building a distributed tech community, okay, which can be set up as a tech company in the sense that it's got SaaS revenue, but it's culturally very different because you're talking about something where every user. And really, when I say user, they're somewhere in between a user and an employee. They're a netizen. Your responsibility to them is much more than it is to a normal user because they're often a physical resident. But it's less than it is to an employee because you're not supposed to employ every netizen. They're supposed to get their own job. So it's somewhere in between a user and an employee is what a netizen is. And that's how you can think of it, a netizen like network citizen. Okay, so that's why it's profitable. This is something which could make many billions of dollars. You get half of Hong Kong or seed invest in the next Singapore. That means we can raise venture capital behind it, issue coins behind it. That's important because you can build an economic, not just political coalition behind something. We saw how important that is for crypto. Okay. So that's why starting countries is possible, preferable, and profitable. Okay. So now, let me talk about, so that kind of recaps the network state in a few minutes. Now let me actually show you a new thing, which you haven't seen yet. So you might say, how can you help? Everybody here wants to help and do something. Well, I figured out one parallelized action that all of you can do right now and keep helping with as much as your time permits. Go to thenetworkstate.com/dashboard. Okay, you can Google that or just type that in thenetworkstate.com/dashboard. Okay, and you can help crowdsource new societies. Okay, so if you go here, here's how it looks. All right, the network state dashboard, you can Google it or type it in, as I said. That's the URL right there, literally thenetworkstate.com/dashboard. And you can list a startup society, upvote one or comment on. Okay, so here, for example, you just go to the search box, you type in Vitalia, and then you see Vitalia there. And if you click here to upload it, you'll get a little pop-up. And we're using a thing called Canny. You can sign up for that with Facebook or Google or GitHub or an email address. Google is convenient, right? So you click Google, you sign up, and then what happens, voila, you've now uploaded it. Ta-da, okay? You can also make a comment there. And what we're going to do is we're going to be reviewing this. There's an admin interface, so it's moderated, okay? And so it's that easy. Sign up, vote for Vitalia, list your society. If you have one, we're going to moderate the list. And so here, for example, are all of those which are, quote, listed. In the same way that some asset would get listed on Coinbase, we'll list them here. And then we might do things with listed things, okay? These are the ones which I think of as high quality enough to be on stage at the next Network State conference, right? That's a subjective judgment, of course, but it's just something where I feel, due diligence to founders and so on, and for the community, and we feel it's real, okay? And there's some digital communities here, some physical communities. We'll add a lot more tooling over here, but this gets us going. So just come here, you can submit, you can upvote, and then you can also comment. And I'll just show you the comment version in a second. But basically, if you want to tap at the top, you can see the listed ones as well. Okay. So thank you. That is, what we're doing right now. Is just build this directory of all these sharp societies. Let me pause there. And I'm not sure if there's time for questions. If not, I can take questions tomorrow as well.
Hey there, thank you for the talk. That was fantastic, and we know that all of us really enjoyed it. I think we're going to take some questions from the crowd, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, excellent. I'm sure we'll have.
Can somebody also point at the crowd so I can just kind of see the crowd since I can't really see them right
Yes, so that's happening right now. All right.
Okay.
Hey, everyone. Hey.
All right, great.
Okay, who wants to be the first to ask the question? Bueller. Right over there.
Was the acronym that you just said, Society as a Service, was this the first time you were talking about that specifically in that sense? Or SaaS? I don't know if you can hear me.
I heard him say something about the acronym of Society as a Service, but I didn't hear more than that.
I was just asking, is this today the first time you're saying that? Because that's really great.
Is today the first time I'm saying that acronym? No, it's not. But maybe it's maybe I should say it more.
Thank you.
The computer needs to be plugged in.
Hello. What do you think is the best way to present this idea so that countries who are considering hosting it are more open to it instead of feeling like it's a zero-sum game over sovereignty?
Extremely good question. This is maybe the most important thing I'm thinking about this year. Just to repeat the question, how do we express this in terms of a country's self-interest and not just the community? So the meta observation is this is very similar to the crypto fiat interface in general, right? So you have this cloud cryptocurrency and you have the land fiat currencies and you have an interface between them, which is a bridge between the online digital currency and the offline world. And that takes different forms in different countries, but the fundamental thing is like the crypto exchange, right? Which is not like $1 million business, it's not $1 billion business, it's like a $100 billion or $1 trillion business. If you add it to Coinbase and Binance, that gets you into multiple hundreds of billions, and we're still early in this whole thing. We'll probably be trillions by the time when it's all done. And that's just a cryptocurrency fiat currency interface. If you generalize that and you say, what is the crypto identity, fiat identity interface, like interface between digital and physical passports, right? If you say, what is the crypto company, fiat company interface, what's the interface between DAOs and offline companies like DAO laws, you start to see that actually all of those bridges are probably worth billions, hundreds of billions, and so on in the future. So you're asking is, what is the bridge between the crypto community and the fiat community? Now, this is going to be as complicated and subtle and so on as the cryptocurrency, fiat currency bridge. And as you correctly observed, there's going to be some countries that will fight this in the same way that, a religious movement, for example, around the world will have some countries that are favorable and some that are unfavorable and so on. But I'll give a few high-level answers. The first is that most countries, other than the US and China, and in general, other than big countries, want capital and talent to come there. They really want, especially post-COVID. A lot of them spent a lot of money. They're in a hole. And if you're from the San Francisco Bay Area, or you're from Beijing or something like that, you're accustomed to the government basically not just taking you for granted, but actively hating you, attacking tech, driving you out, and so on and so forth. Most places around, no comment on the local environment, but okay, right? Most places around the world, though, aren't like that. They want, at least in theory, they want capital and talent to come there and will roll out the red carpet. So, for example, His Majesty of Bhutan is trying to set up a new special economic zone on the border of India. The president of Palau has like RNSID. The Marshall Islands have passed a DAO law. Wyoming and Tennessee have data laws, right? So the answer is first to go where you wanted, and that's a big part of it right there. I think the second part is you want dual citizens of cloud and land. Okay, so the same way that you have somebody who is, let's say, a American Catholic, right, and they respect both the state and God. Okay, you have like a Bitcoin American who is basically a dual citizen of cloud and land and respects the state and the network. Okay, so like an American Bitcoin Catholic, an ABC, would have God, state, and network as three different sort of loyalties that they have to sort of trade off, right? And in the past, people would say, oh, are they taking orders? This is like JFK was like controversial at the time. It's like very old fashioned now. They'd say, oh, are they taking orders from the Pope in Rome? Or are they going to be the president of the US or what have you? People would attack this kind of thing and say, okay, well, where's the loyalty to? Okay. That's always been a thing whenever you've had a transnational thing of some kind versus a national. That's always been a tension, a stirring tension within communities historically. Okay. So the flip version of that is if you have an international movement like Catholicism, like Bitcoin, like the Greek movement, for example, environmental movement, it has sort of supporters in every country, and that's like a pool of almost like liquidity that you can tap in every country, which is not completely foreign. So a lot of crypto people think, okay, let me just get a lot of money and then come to some foreign country and buy it. It doesn't usually work like that. What you want to have is 10%, 15%, 20%, even 50% of that country sympathetic to you, as if they have converted to Bitcoin, converted to Catholicism, and then they'll roll out the red carpet. Okay, so that's an important second part of it, which is you want dual citizens of cloud and land. You want to go and set up not just in places like Tennessee or Wyoming or Palau or Marshall Islands or what have you. You want to also set up in places where your community members live. And so it's kind of the overlap of those two, which are where are the friendly governments and where are your community members? You put that together, that starts to do things. And you actually need to look at that systematically because your people are going to be scattered all over the world and often located in unfriendly jurisdictions, and the governments are going to be here, so we want to look at the intersection. So let me pause there. This is going to be a big part of Network Seek 2 second edition. But really good question.
Hey, Balaji, Nicholas here. I really like the coalition of the power user and the powerless. Also something that my God Wade, starting Prosper Africa, talked about, how it could upgrade the powerless. Can you talk a bit more about that, how that could look like in practice, or what you're already seeing that's going in that direction?
Sure, yeah, so to elaborate on that, at the very beginning of cryptocurrency, and I think this is still a useful mnemonic, it was useful for the last 10 years, I think it'll be useful for the next 10. And then I'll explain the powerless and power using. Cryptocurrency is good for those transactions that are very small, very large, very fast, very international, very transparent, very automated, and or very regulated, okay? And so for example, it's great for something like an ICO where you have lots of small and transactions of the world. It's very automated. It's very international. It's very transparent. It's on chain. That's where cryptocurrency shines. But where it doesn't shine is a Starbucks transaction, which everybody focuses on. That's like an average person's payment, which is not small or large. It's like medium scale. It's not very fast. It's not very international. It's not very automated. The receipt doesn't need to be on the blockchain. So the point is that when everybody focuses on crypto for the Starbucks transaction, they're actually attacking the wrong problem, because that kind of works, right? For the middle class person, that already kind of works. It's highly optimized. It's equivalent of telephony, right? The number one application on the internet was not domestic phone calls. The plain old telephone lines, POTS, works really well for that. The telephony took off on the internet was actually Skype. It's international calls. That's where plain old telephone service didn't work that well. Just like where crypto is working now is like international wire transfers for stable coins, not Starbucks payments, right? What's my point? Point is, the more satisfied somebody is, right, the more of, let's say, if Democrats are in power, the more of a Democrat they are. If communists are in power in China, the more of a communist they are, okay? Then the less dissatisfied they are with the current way of things, right? The more they like the current government. And so that's not your target market. Your target market for startup societies are the powerless and the power users. They're the people, and by the way, sometimes they can be the same person. Think about, let's say, somebody like CZ at Binance. He is a power user, absolutely, but he's also somewhat powerless when it comes to a government, right? He's being attacked in many ways. On balance, by the way, I think CZ did a lot for human rights in terms of getting people to get money out of China, getting people in Nigeria or places like that that were under, terrible governments into Bitcoin. So it's a complicated thing, but I think on balance, he did a lot of good. The point being, though, that the powerless and the power user are the ones who are dissatisfied with the system. And recognizing that means you just don't think about the mainstream. Double down on the kind of people who are here, and then double down on that again. Okay? I'm freeing you to do that. Anybody who says we need to appeal to normies is wrong. They're wrong. And the reason they're wrong is you can get to 1 million people on abnormies. Okay? You're all abnormies. I love you very much, but you're all abnormies here. Okay? You're all early adopters. You're all tech people. Okay? You can get to 1 million people just on abnormies, and that'll change the world. And you can get there, right? Now, I'm not saying, by the way, don't take that to the extreme of repel normies. That's not exactly right. You should have a message where normies are indifferent to it. They think it's weird, but fine, go ahead and do it. Okay? So basically, you want normies to not attack you, but you don't need normies to buy into it. They simply won't. That's why they're normies by definition. They're going to be late adopters.
Hello. So in crypto, there's a meme that like all tokens are a proxy for hardware. Like Bitcoin is just a proxy for GPUs and computing power. And I kind of see network states as a proxy for real estate. So like I could invest and buy a house here in Prospero, and I can still cash a lot of the value from Vitalia and the government systems without actually investing in the companies directly. So my question is, what are the projects that you're seeing that are doing the best in the physical space? So property development, architecture, civil engineering, those kind of concepts where they're actually providing value to the land and stuff.
Yeah, so if someone could repeat the question, I heard essentially crypto communities are a proxy for real estate, just like crypto is a proxy for Bitcoin. Is that roughly right? Maybe someone could repeat it. It's a little fuzzy.
Yeah, that type. Crypto is a proxy for hardware, and then that network states are a proxy for real estate, and then we're the best projects that are working in the physical world.
Yes. So, right. I mean, I think the entire concept of the network state is based on the idea of how do we take all of this energy, all this power, money, influence, community that we have in the cloud, and how do we project that onto the land, right? And, I think you're right that one measure of power is, I mentioned in the network state dashboard, population, income, and real estate. So the reason that dashboard is important is it takes this abstract concept, makes it concrete. You can put yourself on a network state dashboard and see your progress. And so the amount of real estate that you control, in some sense to control, whether it's buy, rent, lease, or even just have a flag out there that, that there's a supporter there, okay? That absolutely is a measure of sort of territory and influence. I'll make one comment on this and maybe then, repeat your question if it's not responsive to it. But, there's in San Francisco a while back, Patrick Collison was the CEO of Stripe. That's a multi-billion-dollar company. It'd be, valued by almost any city or any country to have it there. But San Francisco managed to drive out Patrick Collison and Stripe with this silly Prop C tax. And they drove them to South San Francisco, and they had to give up this really nice headquarters they built in San Francisco. And then San Francisco itself didn't get the tax either, so they just had pure deadweight loss. They drove a major potential source of revenue out of the city, and they didn't make money. Now maybe the San Francisco city government was happy because they just don't want the tech guys there, so they have more political power even if they have less money. But the point being that normally someone who had such power in the cloud would have some power on land, right? Normally the billionaires, the captains of industry within a given city are considered pillars of the local community, and the mayors and the government, are aligned with them at least for value creation, if not always aligned on everything. That's not the case right now. We can build $1 billion business online, but we need 1 billion permits to build a shed in our backyard if you're in the US, okay? That asymmetry is what we're solving. So real estate is absolutely one measure of it, But another measure of it is, can we create special economic zones? Can we do what's being done in Prosperity and change laws, right? How much can we summon this power from the cloud to start bending reality in the physical world? You can see Bitcoin signs everywhere. You can see, Facebook's campus. You can see a billion smartphones around the world. You can see electric cars whizzing around and Ubers pulling up. The cloud absolutely does have an influence over land, but can we do more, right? So real estate is absolutely one version of that, but more generally it is, how much can we open up a region on the earth which operates by our rules, like the rules of the cloud?
That's
Another question. So you are talking about sovereignty and about we also need normies, but can get up to 1 million people who are not normies or abnormies or decentralized people to one place. And I want to ask you, do you have any kind of quality concepts or standards for these individuals in order to prevent them from going collectivist or pump and dumping out of the system? What kinds of sovereignty do we need to think about in different dimensions than just land and coin, like cognitive sovereignty, intellectual autonomy? Where do you see this going, and how would you draw the line? What would be the important things to look out of and also to categorize?
Excellent question. So actually, if you guys go to the networkstate.com/poll, POLL, okay, there is something that I put up there. Let me show you. I can put it on screen for a second. So if you go to maybe I can chat with someone. Maybe somebody can message that up, but it's the networkstate.com/POLL, okay? If you go to that, I did a survey of the ideology of people at the Network State Conference. So I'm going to publish an article on this, but fundamentally we can be quantitative about this. I asked, actually let me just put it on screen so we see if I can show it. So here is, it's in Spanish. Let me just show you this poll for a second. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, so if I just show you the poll, okay, I'm gonna go just, skip ahead for a second. Please don't put an ACF. Okay, so this is pretty cool, okay? If you can see this, I'm zooming in. Please do this if you want to participate. Rate your degree of affection for each person, place, or thing on a -3 to +3 scale. For example, Bitcoin, -3 to +3, Ethereum, Solana, Bitcoin Maximals, Biden, Warren, et cetera, Anderson, Kalanick, nuclear power, okay? You do all this stuff, and it's basically about 100, things like this, which you're just reacting to from, I really dislike this, to I really like this, to I don't have an opinion. Okay, with me so far? The point is, this gives you a 100-dimensional vector. And notice that I'm asking not just about abstract things like, Dubai or Israel or something. I'm also asking about personalities like Trump or Warren or Biden, or even like less well-known people like, Kalanick or Travis is fairly well-known. You know what I mean? Point is, I find that it's one part ideology and one part individuals that sort of defines where people land up on a spectrum. Okay, so what I've got out of this, I've got, let's say, a 100-dimensional vector of -3 to +3 on thousands of people. Okay, and that gives what I call the ideology vector. Okay, there's a whole set of literature on this. It's called spatial theory of voting. But if you guys are mathematical, the very simple version of that is you can take that. Let's say I've got 1,000 people and they answered 100 questions. You can compact that into like 1,000 by 2-dimensional space. You start putting people on an ideology space. And what you want to do, in my view, is you define the ideology vector for your community, okay? And for example, if Eric Rimmon took this, okay, and Eric is there in the front, hi Eric, right? If Nicholas took it, right, they could also have all their community members take it. And then you would find basically probably that they mostly cluster around Eric, number one. And number two is you could find which issues there was some variance on. For example, the most surprising thing to me in this poll was how much people disagree with me on the death penalty. And that's not something I ever talked about publicly. Not that it's like a taboo thing, just not something I ever talked about. And I expect everybody to agree with me on that, but they didn't. Or rather, there's just much wider spread on that than I expected, okay? So the point about this is, and maybe if I spoke to it, then people would, snap to grid on that if they were coming to our community, or they would disagree and not, okay? But what that starts to do is it starts to put some numbers around what your ideology is. And this way you don't just have to describe it with words like libertarian versus collectivist and so on. I agree that everybody here probably is more on the libertarian versus collectivist side. But once you zoom in to that, you can get to a total FU style libertarian, or you can get to one who is willing to work in groups to get something done. I actually think that describes many people here. If you're interested in startup societies, that is different than, let's say, the Mad Max or anarcho-capitalism caricature, right? You wouldn't be a joiner if you were all the way to the libertarian extreme. You're actually more of a moderate in some sense than you might think if you're working together to build a society. The point about that is where you are on that spectrum can now be quantified with this ideology vector. So that's one way that you can filter. You can literally say, what's your ideology vector? And what is the dot product of that with the community's ideology vector? Okay, if you guys know math, what is the inner product of that? So the overall match. And then also, what are there specific points of ideology where somebody is a -3 on something that you're a +3 on, right? If they're a -3 on biohacking, they're probably not a fit for Vitalia, for example, right? Even if they're a -1 on it, they're probably not a fit. Just not their culture. I can understand if they're there. Maybe you'd agree with them on a lot of other things, but they might be, let's say, religiously conservative to such a point that they think it's playing God or whatever, and that's fine. You might be able to agree with them on many other things in terms of freedom and liberty, but maybe not biohacking. So you'd be maybe friendly, but you're not in the same thing, right? And then you have people who are like Warren, who'd be on a totally, just on the other side of the aisle, right? So that's how I start thinking about ideology, is quantitative ideology, and that's how you can filter. Now your next question will be, well, what if people misrepresent their ideology on this? Then you can get to version 3 and version 4, where you pull in their Twitter, you have references from other people, and so on and so forth. You can add more signals to be sort of anti-fraud on the ideology vector. But fundamentally, that's a way of screening somebody prior to entering the community. It's much like measuring culture fit for entering a company, but it's measuring culture fit for entering a community. Let me pause there.
Hello. Hey, Balaji. We're excited to have you in a couple days. At Vitalia, we're all longevity maxis, or most of us, and you have a cool background. You were getting involved with FDA at one point back in the day, and you have a lot of thoughts about longevity. So maybe, and we'll talk about this later, I'm sure, maybe you could elaborate on what kind of problems you see in the medical system and what kind of upgrades we might make going forward, given that we have a certain level of sovereignty here.
Totally. So, yeah, basically, I'll show you guys, I don't know, I think it's funny or whatever. Hold on, this is a funny article from a while ago, and I'll show you something else. So basically, here, screen share. So first, here's like this, do you guys see that? Balaji, who may run the FDA for Trump, hates the FDA, but Silicon Valley, like, Srinivasan. Lol, okay? So, journalism mad, but basically this was like 7 years ago, essentially, Nubble is coming, okay. There's a bunch of guests who are coming to, Vitalia soon. But basically, some of these old tweets are being deleted, but Point is, all the Silicon Valley folks were into this, but I was offered the number 2 position, but why didn't I take it? The reason is I literally thought, just like it was easier to start Bitcoin than to reform the Fed, it's literally easier to start a new country than to reform the FDA. To understand why that's the case, there's this book called Reputation and Power, okay? I recommend everybody buy this book and read this book. Now, it's written by an FDA sympathizer. It's by this guy, Daniel Carpenter. He's like an FDA simp. See, but he is at least honest enough to quote the executives that were harmed by FDA, and so you can sort of reverse engineer what actually happened, because he's like an unreliable narrator, right? Let me see if I can find something here on this, because just to show you what the FDA actually is. You guys see the screen there? It's loading. Let's see if it loads. Okay. Do you guys see the screen there, the Kindle?
Yes.
Oops, it's loading or whatever. Point is, yeah, here we are. Sorry, it's so slow. Okay. Can you guys see the screen?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's a guy, this is an anecdote that's told near the very beginning of the book. This guy named G. Kurt Robb, okay? He was the CEO of Genentech. And he actually gives a story that involves Latin America, where he wanted to get on a plane to visit his wife, and there was a guy standing there with a machine gun, and he said he can't come in, and he tried to get on the plane, and then the guy took his machine gun, took the safety off, and pointed at me and said, "You can't come in." I said, "Oh, now I can't go in." And that's the way I always describe the FDA. The FDA is standing there with a machine gun against the pharmaceutical industry, so you better be their friend rather than their enemy. They are the boss. If you're a pharmaceutical firm, they own you body and soul. All right? So this was 14 years ago. And the thing is, like, of course, Daniel Carpenter, because he's an FDA simp, he's like, it waxes hyperbolic and jumbles images. It's a jarring image, blah, blah. But what I give, so like Carpenter has, in many ways, the soul of a journo, but he's more honest than the typical journo because at least he quotes the CEO so you can hear it from themselves. Okay? So if you decode and invert what Carpenter is saying and treat him as an unreliable narrator, it's a phenomenal book that tells you exactly how the FDA is like a mafia. And by the way, internally at FDA, they don't usually use the proper noun or they don't say the FDA, they just call it FDA. It's like if you're in LA, they call it the 101, and in San Francisco, they call it 101 or whatever. Okay? Point is, they've got their own lingo, they've got their own way of thinking. They're not a passive regulator like DMV, they're active, they're as ruthless and evil as the SEC or the taxis or the hotel lobbies, but they have the power of fear on their side to an even greater extent than the SEC, where people are really scared about any medical intervention of any kind, right? So you actually have to put the fear on the other side of things where you say, we're all gonna die unless they let us live, let us opt out, let us have medical sovereignty. And you start also illustrating with visuals and with movies, things like the Dallas Buyers Club, where you show all the deaths that are on the head of the FDA, where they delayed drugs. You can quantify this, by the way. Anytime there was a drug that was ever approved, it was delayed for 10 years, morbidity and mortality declined. So all the morbidity and mortality during those years is on the head of FDA. So you could run an ad, Google ad, you could say, did your loved one pass away from XYZ disease during this time period? And if so, you could get real people to talk to who might not know that a drug that would have treated it was approved 5 or 6 or 7 years later and was in review at that time. That's someone who was literally killed by FDA. You can make the invisible graveyard visible. You understand, right? So tech people have always spoken about these things in terms of rational cost benefit and so on and so forth. And that's fine and that's good. We also need to make the emotional case, which is don't die like Brian Johnston. Like the FDA is killing us. For example, if you Google this thing, if I die, lay my body on the steps of the FDA, right? That's the folks from ACT UP, where they had HIV, they had a terminal illness in the late 80s, and FDA was blocking drugs that would have saved them. That was enough emotional force to punch through, where it showed the FDA wasn't just protecting you, but it was protecting you from the experimental drug that might cure you or make you healthier, right? Now, post-COVID, post the collapse of faith in the regulatory state, post Uber and Airbnb and Bitcoin and crypto, people are much more ready to hear this. Long ago, 10 years ago, Lisa Kanzia gave a talk that actually talked about the stages of disruption. You start with local digital, then you go to local physical, like taxis and hotels, then you go to, federal digital, which is FCC, and after we beat them, we go to federal physical, which is FDA, and eventually you go to like international physical, which is like nuclear, that's like the hardest, okay? But point is, this community over here can actually help starting to break the FDA by A, understanding what it is, number one, read that book, and there's others like it, but just start there. Don't take a guy in faith because he's an FDA simp, invert what he's saying. And then B, we need to start building a community of drug and device reviewers. It is not sufficient to simply complain about the FDA, we need to become a better FDA. Okay, what does that mean? There's a lot of actual biotech PhDs and so on in this room. You think about what Huberman is doing, you think about what Sinclair is doing, to some extent what I'm doing, what Brian Johnson is doing. They are old scientists, new scientists. They're like gentlemen scientists who figure out stuff on their own, just publish it and go direct. DSci is like this, Vita DAO is like this, Molecule DAO is like this, right? It's Huberman, it's Sinclair, it's Brian Johnson. All of that together is an emerging new movement that doesn't just say FDA sucks, it says this is better, here's the data, here's the studies, and I'm self-experimenting. I've got skin in the game. So you're no longer just a patient, a passive patient on a gurney, you're an active participant in your own health, okay? There's much more I can say on this huge topic, but just like with Bitcoin, it wasn't sufficient to critique the Fed, but to build something stronger than it, right? In the same way, it's not sufficient to critique FDA, we need to build something stronger than it, an internet version of the FDA, an internet first version of the FDA. And I want to say one last thing, which is the way that FDA does, for example, like so-called phase 4 surveillance, okay? Adverse events reporting. It's total nonsense. There's a form, I think it's like 483 or something on the FDA's website. You've probably never filled it out. What you have done is you've probably done a Yelp review or an Uber star rating, an Airbnb rating at some point. There's almost no feedback on drugs and devices and their actual performance. Simply an app that collected that aggregated that across countries, where you could scan the barcode of a drug and pull up every single report on it around the world. You start aggregating data across national boundaries. Of course, you should be able to do that because biology is the same globally. Like somebody who has Italian ancestry in America and Italian ancestry in Italy will be able to share data, even if their governments can't. Okay, so there's fundamental reasons why an internet-first version of FDA would be way better. A DAO that actually had people opting in that did the reviews and whatnot. So maybe we call it FDAO. That'd be fun, right? FDAO versus FDOA, because that could be FDA, you're dead on arrival, and FDAO, you might live forever.